Before we get into the stories, I'm excited to announce I have a new channel called Monster Trail Cams. Here's a quick trailer for my new channel. The link is below. Monster Trail Cams is your ticket to the unseen and supernatural. Sourced from a vast network of mystery hunters worldwide, our channel reveals a collection of strange creatures and supernatural events that will leave you on the edge of your seat. From shadowy figures lurking in dense forests to inexplicable entities prowling under the cloak of night, each chilling clip peels back another layer of the world's untold mysteries. We release new episodes several times a week. Okay, now let's get to the stories. My life completely changed, and essentially all came crashing down the year I went camping for a few days in Yosemite. It was late May of 2008, and I was feeling depressed. I had just broken up with my girlfriend and basically felt like I was at the end of my rope. So I decided to go on a road trip from San Francisco all the way to Yosemite National Park, which was essentially a 200-mile drive straight east. If you've never been there, Yosemite is quite literally in the middle of nowhere. There are no cities within miles of it, and basically only one main road that leads into and out of it. I arrived around noon on a Saturday and immediately set up camp in the Upper Pines campground. I had all of the stuff I needed and was ready to relax for the next 2 days before going back home on Monday. The campground was pretty empty. Maybe about 10 or 15 other campsites were occupied. I started a small fire and began cooking lunch when I noticed a young couple setting up a tent about 50 yards from me. As I ate my food, an older couple with 2 dogs arrived and set up camp right next to me. They seemed nice enough, so we exchanged pleasantries as they unpacked their stuff. After they finished, I watched as they walked over to the trail to start hiking. I finished eating and decided to take a walk myself. I walked along the trail for about 10 minutes, taking in the sights when I saw something odd off in the distance. It looked like something standing on top of one of the rock formations that jutted out from the ground. At first, I thought it was just an optical illusion because it was so far away and in a place that would be nearly impossible to get to. But as I continued to look at it, it seemed to be moving closer and further away. It also looked like whatever it was stood on 2 legs instead of 4 like an animal would. Whatever this thing was disappeared behind another rock formation, reappeared again, and then disappeared completely. This made me incredibly curious, so I decided to speed up my pace towards it. I got closer in about 10 minutes and looked towards where I had seen it, but saw nothing. It was at this point that I realized how quiet it was all around me. Usually when you're in nature, you hear birds chirping or the wind blowing through the trees, but it was completely silent here except for my own breathing. I decided to continue walking down the trail and see if I could find whatever this thing was, so I kept going until the trail ended and opened up into a clearing with another trail branching off to the right. I'm pretty sure I had seen the couple from before going that way. As soon as I took a few steps onto this new trail, I heard something slam on the ground behind me, like a rock being thrown. I turned around immediately and scanned my surroundings but didn't see anything out of place. No branches moved or leaves rustled. Nothing was moving. After a few seconds, I decided to keep going and see if whatever it was I had seen before had followed me. I didn't see anything, so I kept walking for about 5 minutes when I came across a small clump of trees growing tightly next to each other. As I stood there wondering how they had come to grow that way, I noticed something on the ground just beyond one of the trees that looked like a stick, but it was white in color, which was intriguing. So I walked closer to it, and when I got close enough to pick it up, this creature that I can only describe as a monster appeared from behind the tree right next to me. It was tall, at least 8 feet, had gray skin, black eyes, and no nose, nothing that you could call a normal mouth, just an opening where its face met its neck. It also had long fingers with sharp claws instead of hands. Shockingly, the creature was so startled by me that it let out a screeching sound and ran away. I was too shocked to move for about 20 seconds, but when I snapped out of it, I booked it back to my campsite. The old couple from before were just returning from their hike as I arrived back at camp. They asked me if everything was all right because they said I looked like I had seen a ghost. I blurted out all about what happened, and the couple seemed genuinely concerned for me. I'm not sure if they were concerned at that point because they believed me or because they thought I was having some sort of an episode. The husband offered to sit with me the rest of the night if I wanted him to, but after a while I felt much better, and we all relaxed and continued about our respective business, just sitting and relaxing at our sites. And then, at around 9:30 in the evening, we both heard the loud noise of something slamming into one of the trees behind us. It made a noise that even shook the ground, which scared the crap out of everyone there. The one dog belonging to the couple started barking in the direction of the noise and wouldn't stop. So the husband got up to see what was going on, and there, behind the trees, was the same thing I had seen earlier. And it started throwing rocks at him and his dog. We could even hear them hitting from where we were. He ran back to his campsite, and I watched as this thing chased him back, but it continued running towards the trail that we had all been on earlier. I then watched it follow the trail until it reached a bend where it disappeared into the forest. We never saw or heard from it again after that. The husband and wife packed up their things instantly, though, said goodbye, and drove off in their car. I stayed the rest of the night by myself and didn't sleep a wink. I still don't know why or how I even did that. The next morning I packed up my stuff and left as quickly as possible. Needless to say, I haven't been back to Yosemite since then because it completely ruined the experience for me. And no, this thing wasn't a Sasquatch or Bigfoot. It was something else entirely that looked like an alien with gray skin and black eyes. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't normal at all. I've been camping and hiking all over the country and have never experienced anything like this. Whatever it was, it wanted us out of that campground and did everything in its power to scare us away. About 5 years ago, I was a single parent living just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. Anyone familiar with that area probably knows about the Great Smoky Mountains nearby, as well as several additional national forests. I had moved down to Asheville from Pennsylvania with my ex to follow his job, but it ended up not working out. Unfortunately, that wasn't surprising, but I was then stuck in the area for a while until I could save enough money to afford to move back north. I had enough money to stay in Asheville for a few weeks while the legal stuff got sorted out, so that was good. I was spending my free time taking care of my toddler and applying to jobs back up north whenever I could. One reason I was so intent on getting out of North Carolina quickly was that I wasn't used to this kind of rural setting. I thought I'd grown up in a country area with a few dairy farms around, but I was definitely wrong. My ex was a land developer, and we had moved down here as their company was snapping up land and turning it into subdivisions. This was great for them, not so much for me. We moved into a little house in a more remote area, and our nearest neighbor was actually a logging company, so I didn't have anyone to talk to regularly. Sometimes I would call my sister back home to chat. She was married with a few kids of her own, or I'd spend a while talking to the mail person, usually an older woman named Jen, who would come down our long driveway to deliver the mail. I'd told Jen about the divorce. She was sympathetic, and I think felt bad for me. After that, she hung around more often to chat. She was great with my daughter, and I was happy for some human interaction. With a little less than 2 weeks to go until I could move back home, winter started creeping up. And I wasn't thrilled with being way out in the woods in case a freak storm came through. But either way, it was nice to pack up at my own pace. So one evening I was packing up the majority of the kitchen, except for necessities. The house was surrounded by pine trees, so we were covered in shade relatively early in the evening, and it also got dark faster in our area. As I said, I wasn't comfortable in this kind of rural setting, so I always kept the garage light on so that I could always see the top of the driveway where I parked my car. I had just started putting away a set of fancy dinnerware that we'd been given as a wedding gift when I heard what sounded like a rock hitting a window. I stopped to listen, but I found it hard to concentrate as my daughter started making noise in her high chair. I walked over to quiet her down and heard the sound again, A little pinging sound like a rock hitting glass and bouncing off. It was coming from the direction of the living room. Immediately, I stiffened up. After all, I was alone in this house with a toddler, in an area I didn't really like. The nearest person would hopefully respond if I needed. The lights were off in the living room, so I just stuck my head into the room and looked at the windows quickly. As I glanced around, a rock bounced off the far window and I jerked back into the kitchen. Probably just a kid playing around, I tried to convince myself, but knew there weren't any kids in the area. Kylie, my daughter, didn't seem bothered by what was happening, and I went back to her, shushing her as if she was the one who needed comforting. For a few minutes it was quiet, and I was just starting to catch my breath when I heard the garage door rattle. It was one of those big metal doors that you have to pull down over the carport. I ran to the kitchen window and looked out into the driveway, where the light clearly outlined something walking around. At first, I thought I was looking at someone in a Halloween costume. It looked like a werewolf getup, but I realized quickly that it was too realistic, not loose like I would expect a costume to be. What I was looking at was a large dog-like creature standing on its hind legs. I could only watch as it moved around the side of the garage and made another banging sound. It must have been hitting the side of the garage for some reason. As soon as I couldn't see it anymore, I went and grabbed Kylie and headed upstairs, where I could look down on the front yard out of the bedroom window. We stayed up there for maybe 10 minutes before I heard a vehicle come down the driveway. It was the mail truck with headlights on, and I held Kylie tightly as I ran back downstairs to meet Jen. I didn't open the screen door right away, and she looked confused, waiting on the porch. "Hey," I said to her breathlessly, and then explained what had happened. She listened without interrupting, only turning once to look at the garage door, which was closed. When I finished, she stepped off the porch and went to the garage. I warned her to be careful. She took her phone out, took a few photos, and came back to the house to show me through the screen door. The photos were of footprints, which I can only describe them as really big hind paws. If I spread my hand out, they were larger than that, and five-toed. Jen could tell how freaked out I was and started to explain to me about the supposed dogmen in the area. I hadn't heard of them before. This wasn't any kind of legend I'd heard back home. She told me that there were a few reports every year, and they were really similar to mine. Dogmen coming to remote houses and messing with things. Never hurting anyone, but always doing something to scare people. The banging on the garage and throwing rocks was pretty standard. She told me that if I hadn't gone upstairs, I probably would have seen it looking through the first-floor windows at me. All I can say is, I'm happy I didn't. I probably would have had a heart attack. A few weeks later, as planned, I moved back north to a much more populated area about 10 minutes away from my sister. Kylie is 7 now, and every now and then I wonder if I should tell her this story when she's older. But I think she's like me, and it would probably mess with her more than help. Anyway, there is no reason for her to really know about it. My ex is still in North Carolina and will probably stay there. I often wonder if he's encountered anything. Doesn't really matter, though, because there is no way I'd be willing to go back down there. This encounter isn't something I'd want to experience again. I was born and raised in the small town of Greenbrier County, West Virginia. It's a beautiful place nestled in the Appalachian Mountains. My family has lived in this area for generations, and I'm proud to have my roots from here. I grew up exploring all the forests and streams and hunting and fishing with my dad. It's a simple life, but it's one that I cherish. Unfortunately, though, I've been offered a job transfer to another state, and even though I'm reluctant to leave, I know it's a good opportunity. So, I'm heading to Roanoke, Virginia, just a few hours drive south. But since I have such deep roots and great memories here, one thing I wanted to do before leaving was go hiking one last time at Beartown State Park to soak up the beauty of the local wilderness. Beartown is known for its unusual rocky formations, massive boulders, overhanging cliffs, and deep crevices. Basically, it looks like a surreal landscape, and you can really get lost in the massive rock formations. So that's why I found myself on a Saturday morning in early April, setting out to walk the Beartown Trail. The day was chilly, but sunny, and I had packed a lunch to eat at the top of one of the rocks. I figured it would spend the whole day there walking around and reflecting on the area. But about an hour into the hike, things started to feel off. I began to feel like I was being watched, and not by the usual suspects like deer or squirrels, but by something else. I had been here so many times I couldn't count them, but something about this feeling was different. I tried to shake it off, but it persisted. I started to wonder if I was really more nervous about moving than I had thought. But as I was pondering that, I heard something following behind me. It sounded like heavy footsteps, crunching leaves with each step. But every time I turned around, there was nothing there. I began to walk faster, but the footsteps kept pace with me. And then I heard something else. A deep, guttural, growling sound. It was definitely coming from behind me, from whatever was following me. I turned around again, but still saw nothing. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. Something big and furry. It was dodging in and out of the trees and rocks, staying just out of sight. I started to run, but it was no use. Whatever was following me was faster. And then before I knew it, I could feel it closing in on me, which is not a feeling I can describe adequately enough to get you to know how I felt. This time, when I turned around, I could see it. It was a large, furry creature with yellow eyes. It looked like a cross between a bear and a dog, and it was walking on two legs. I was paralyzed with fear. I had never seen anything like this before. And then in my head, I heard it. I swear I heard the words, "Leave." It growled in a deep, guttural voice. "Leave now." And it was definitely coming after me. I turned and ran as fast as I could, but it was right behind me. I could feel its hot breath on the back of my neck. And then, just as it was about to catch up to me, I swung around with my backpack out in my outstretched arms. I was swinging it like I was holding a baseball bat. I don't know how I had the courage to do it, but I managed to connect with its head, which stopped it for a second. I'm sure I just surprised it, but at least it gave me a few seconds of time. I turned and ran the other way as fast as I could. But this time, I literally didn't look back until I was out of the woods and back to my car. I had been hoping to see other people when I got to the parking lot, but it was empty when I got there. I paused and looked back at the woods, but there was no sign of the creature. Nothing at all. Not even moving in the trees. I climbed into my car and drove away, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I'm still not sure what that creature was. But ever since then, I've been convinced that there are things in this world that we don't know about. Things that we can't explain. And also, whatever that thing was, it definitely wasn't friendly. As if you couldn't have figured that out already. I've thought about it a lot, but I still don't know what that creature was. I can only think that it was some kind of Sasquatch or Yeti-type creature, maybe even a werewolf. But whatever it was, I'm just glad I made it out alive. It's honestly all I care about at this point. And it was January, the start of the spring semester, and some friends of mine were throwing this huge party to welcome everyone back. I was having a great time, honestly, for the majority of the night. Something that I noticed early on, when I had first arrived, was that there was garbage scattered all across the front yard. All the trash bags and cans have been toppled over and torn into. Obviously, I assumed this was because of some animal, but it was actually insane how much trash was scattered about. I mention this because not only was the yard of the frat house trashed, but so were the yards of nearly every other adjacent house on the block. It seemed like whatever was messing with the garbage was big and hungry. Coming from a rural area myself, we had a lot of times where we had an unwelcome stay from a family of raccoons, or even the occasional bear. But it was never as bad as the way that block looked, so much so that everyone I was with that day commented on it too. And then, that was the last I thought of it. Until later. A few hours later, around midnight, I went out on the back porch for a smoke with my friends. That's when I noticed that the porch reeked like urine, and something else I couldn't put my finger on. I assumed someone partied too hard and peed on the porch as a joke or something. I don't know, I couldn't think of any reason other than that. We're out there for a little while when all of a sudden we hear a yell coming from the opposite side of the yard, from the front of the house. It takes me a second to register what the hell is going on, but my friends run back inside to try and see what the fuss is about. So there I am, alone on the porch, with no idea about the impending weird stuff I'm about to witness. I hear a distant conversation yelling, but I'm not paying too much attention to it. I'm just sort of looking out into the yard. Then I see it run by. Coming from the front of the house is a creature that is big, massive even, and sprinting fast as hell. In fact, it was so quick that at first I didn't have a slight idea what it even looked like, only that it was speeding right through the yard, and it was big. Then it stops. It stops right near the edge of the yard, where the forest starts. It sits there for a moment, and even though it's dark, I managed to finally get a decent look at it. It was some kind of wolf, dog, man combination. Just the grossest thing you could imagine, sitting there on all fours and frothing at the mouth. I choked. It scared the crap out of me, and I just choked on my cigarette with the loudest, most obnoxious cough you've ever heard. This was, of course, a huge mistake. The wolf creature snaps its head towards me, and now we're making eye contact. I thought I was going to die, honestly. My nerves were shot. I just kept hoping that maybe someone would come back outside to check on me or something. I wanted to yell, but I knew that if I did, it would probably set this thing off somehow, so I kept quiet. As I'm looking at it, the freakiest thing happens. This wolf, it gets up and it stands on its hind legs, still staring. Now, I really think I'm losing my mind because as big as I thought it was before, now the thing is standing at least 7 feet in the air. Taller than me. Taller than any person I've ever been next to. It was so confusing to look at, really. But I wasn't so messed up that I didn't know what I was seeing. I could tell this wasn't normal. It had these crazy eyes, like glowing human eyes on a dog-like head. I told you already about how tall the thing was, but it wasn't just tall, it was also jacked. It's odd. Human torso was insanely muscular, which explains how it moved around so quickly, I suppose. I just didn't fully comprehend its anatomy. Even the human parts had fur, and even the animal parts looked vaguely human-shaped. We just sat there for a moment, looking at each other. I stood as still as I possibly could, and as boring as that might sound, it worked. Eventually, I won the staring match, and the monster thing just sort of became bored, I think, lost interest in me. It turned around and ran straight into the woods without so much as a second glance. I will never forget that thing, its eyes, the novelty of it all.